I remember the sound of betrayal. It is not the sound of slammed doors or broken glass. It is softer, quieter, more cruel. It begins as absence, as distance, as a gaze that slips away when it should have stayed. And in that moment, you feel it. The fracture, the hairline crack in the mirror you thought unbreakable. Most men scream. They beg. They demand answers. I did not. I swallowed my voice and gave her silence. And in that silence, I discovered a weapon older than rage itself. Rule, hidden in plain sight, he who reacts first loses. It begins in fragments. Betrayal rarely storms through the door. It seeps in through cracks, patient as poison. I felt it long before I admitted it. The delay in her replies, the distracted laughter, the way her eyes searched for something, invisible beyond me, as though I were already fading from the picture. Rule 1. Trust does not die in a moment. It decays in whispers. I noticed the pauses in her words, the way her affection grew rehearsed, as though she were reading from a script that no longer belonged to her. Most men dismiss these signs. They convince themselves it is stress, fatigue, distraction. They pretend not to notice the fracture because they fear the collapse. But fear cannot stop what is already in motion. Her touch was lighter. Her voice carried distance. I told myself it was nothing. I lied to myself because lies are warmer than cold truths. Yet truth is merciless. And it waits. The conflict was inside me. Instinct against denial. One side whispered, "You are losing her." The other pleaded, "No, she still loves you. Hold on." That war raged inside my chest, but deep down I knew the verdict. She had already left me, even as she stood beside me. Rule 2. A man who ignores the fracture will drown when the walls collapse. I began to study her like a stranger, her patterns, her behaviors. Small inconsistencies became glaring alarms. The nights she smiled without reason, the mornings she spoke less. Betrayal does not come with confessions. It comes with patterns. And those patterns, when pieced together, form the map of your undoing. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to demand the truth. But another voice warned me, "Do not reveal what you know. Do not expose your awareness. Let her believe you are blind." That voice was cold, but it was wise, because power is not in discovery. It is in control of reaction. Rule 3. He who sees without being seen already holds the upper hand. The climax of realization struck me one evening. She looked at me, smiled, and I saw the performance behind her eyes. It was not love. It was theater. And in that instant I understood. What I loved was already gone. The ending of this chapter was quiet. No confrontation, no explosion, just silence within me. The awareness that the first weapon is not anger, but sight. The ability to see clearly what others blind themselves to. Betrayal does not wound you first with her actions. It wounds you with your refusal to acknowledge them. And so I chose awareness. And awareness became my first act of war. The worst betrayal is not the one you discover. It is the one you live with long after you know. That is the collapse of illusion. She was still there. She still played her role. The kisses still touched my skin, but they carried no warmth. The laughter still echoed in the room, but it rang hollow. I sat across from her at dinner, and all I saw was an actress. Every gesture, every glance, every word was rehearsed. She was performing love while her heart belonged elsewhere. Rule 4. When affection becomes performance, loyalty has already died. The conflict inside me sharpened. Do I cling to the illusion because illusion is easier than emptiness? Or do I strip it bare, knowing I will stand in ruins? Most men choose illusion. They close their eyes to the act because the act is comfortable. But comfort is a lie. And lies rot the soul. I began to test her performance. Silence became my question. I stopped feeding her stage with my applause. I listened, but I no longer responded. I watched, but I no longer participated. She felt it. She grew uneasy. An actress cannot perform without an audience. Rule 5. The theater of love collapses when the audience refuses to clap. Signs grew clearer. Forced laughter that came a second too late. Touch that landed without intention. Her eyes darted, calculating as if measuring whether I still believed the act. She was desperate to maintain the illusion because exposure would strip her power. The climax of this realization was bitter. I looked at her and finally admitted, this is over. She may still live in the same space, she may still speak the same words, but love is gone and I am merely a spectator. And so I made my choice, not to rage, not to beg, but to detach. Rule 6. Detachment begins not with anger, but with refusal to participate in the lie. The ending of this chapter was my first act of freedom. I no longer clung to what was already dead. I walked through the ashes of illusion and breathed differently. The collapse of illusion is painful, but it is also liberation. For only when the stage burns down can the truth finally be seen. Silence. That was my retaliation. Not shouts, not accusations. Silence. And it shook her more than rage ever could. She expected confrontation. She expected me to demand answers, to scream, to fall apart. That is what men do when betrayed. They bleed out through their words. But I gave her nothing. I sat in the void, and in that void she began to unravel. Rule 7. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence magnified. Conflict raged within me. Part of me wanted to unleash everything, to crush her with truth and accusation. But another part whispered colder wisdom. Your silence is the mirror. Let her see herself in it. So I withheld. I answered less. I gave her only fragments. I withdrew the warmth she once fed on. Signs became clear. She tried to provoke me. Subtle jabs, questions meant to ignite fire. But my stillness consumed her. She searched for my anger and found only a wall. And the guilty cannot bear silence. It forces them to hear the echoes of their own lies. Rule 8. To speak is to surrender control. To stay silent is to reclaim it. The climax came when I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of her reflection in the silence I gave. She could no longer hide her own guilt from herself. She realized the performance was collapsing, not because I exposed her, but because I stopped participating. The ending was power reborn. In silence, I tasted my strength again. I was no longer reacting to her betrayal. She was reacting to my absence. That shift was everything. Detachment is not indifference, it is strategy. It is the art of pulling back the heart so the mind can rule. Rule 9. He who controls reaction controls the battlefield. I began to study her, not as a lover but as a subject. I observed her movements, her words, her attempts to reclaim control. I no longer saw her as a woman who betrayed me. I saw her as a case study in power, weakness, and hunger. Conflict stirred in me, the ache of loss against the cold logic of strategy. But each time pain tried to rise, I answered it with silence. And silence hardened me. Signs of her unraveling multiplied. She grew restless. She tested me with questions. Are you angry? Do you still love me? But my detachment stripped her of answers. I gave nothing, and in that nothing, she lost her place of power. Rule 10. To observe without responding is to hold dominion. The climax was my transformation. I shifted from victim to strategist. I no longer saw myself as broken. I was calculating, silent, watching. Every moment she faltered, I grew stronger. The ending of this chapter was sovereignty. I no longer belonged to her lies. I belonged to myself. And in that detachment, I discovered Machiavelli's truth. Betrayal is war and silence is victory. Betrayal is not random. It is hunger disguised as love. Rule 11. Every betrayal reveals more about the betrayer's emptiness than the betrayed's worth. I dissected her psychology. Why did she betray? Not because I lacked, but because she hungered for validation, novelty, escape. She was restless. She needed the intoxication of secrecy. Betrayal was not about me. It was about her. Conflict shifted. I no longer asked, why me? Instead, I asked, why her? And the answer was simple. Because weakness demands escape, even at the cost of loyalty. Signs were everywhere in hindsight. The restless eyes, the sudden new habits, the excitement she could not explain. All were symptoms of the same disease, hunger without discipline. Rule 12. Do not take betrayal personally. It is repetition of human weakness. The climax was liberation from pride. I realized her betrayal did not diminish me. It exposed her, and in that knowledge I found peace. The ending was wisdom. Betrayal is not venom once you understand it. It is medicine, bitter but strengthening. Pain is a crucible. Betrayal is fire, but from fire, steel is forged. Rule 13. Pain, when harnessed, becomes precision. I stood in the ruins of what we had, but I was not destroyed. I was sharpened. Each wound became a blade. Each silence became armor. I no longer craved her affection, her validation. I craved clarity. Conflict still whispered. The wounded man inside me longed for closure, for apology, for something. But the strategist in me answered, "You need nothing." Her silence is apology enough. Her absence is proof enough. Signs of transformation were everywhere. I spoke less. I saw more. I no longer moved from emotion. I moved from calculation. Rule 14. Betrayal, when mastered, becomes power. The climax was my rebirth. I was no longer the man she betrayed. I was the man her betrayal created, silent, cold, untouchable. The ending was strength. I learned that men collapse under betrayal because they cling to illusion. But those who rise ruthless. They become something greater than they were before. Now only silence remains, not the silence of defeat, the silence of empire. Rule 15. The one who speaks last concedes. The one who stays silent commands eternity. I chose not to seek revenge. I chose not to expose her. I chose silence, and in that choice, I became untouchable. She withers in the absence of reaction. She searches for echoes, but there are none. My silence is her punishment, and it is eternal. Conflict ends here, for there is no war left to fight. Silence has already won. Signs linger in memory. Her restless eyes, her nervous words, but they no longer sting. They are only reminders of why I rule in silence now. Rule 16. Let silence be both weapon and monument. The climax is not rage. It is detachment so complete that she no longer exists in my story. Betrayal fades into irrelevance. The ending is legacy. Ruthless silence is not emptiness. It is empire. It is throne. It is the unshakable law I carry forward. Betrayal cannot reach me anymore, and so I speak this one final truth. Betrayal is the test, silence is the answer, and the man who learns this rule becomes unbreakable.